Finally, the Apple Silicon transition is complete. Slightly later than advertised, but Apple has now finally removed all Intel Macs from the lineup. And we've got a new Mac Pro, powered by the mighty M2 Ultra and boasting PCI Express Generation 4 expansion. Lots to talk about then. Well, you'd think so, but out of a WWDC keynote presentation that lasted just over 2 hours, Apple devoted just under 2.5 minutes to the new Mac Pro. And that seems a bit odd, particularly given how much presentation time was devoted to widgets in Apple's various software platforms. So does Apple care about the new Mac Pro, and who is this new machine for? So meet the new Mac Pro. And you'll be forgiven for thinking it looks a lot like the old Mac Pro, and that's because it does, of course, which makes sense. The design of this machine is part of Apple's design language, which also extends to the Pro XDR display, and there's nothing much wrong with the design. The Mac Pro still comes in tower or rack-mounted formats, and you'll be pleased to know that you can still buy wheels for the tower for a meager additional $400. The Mac Pro is powered by the M2 Ultra, and that's available in 2 flavors, and the only difference between them is the number of graphics cores. Both options have 24 CPU cores, 16 of which are performance cores and 8 are power efficient cores. And both of these options are offering a 32-core neural engine for machine learning tasks, and they support up to 192 gigabytes of RAM. So the difference is just those GPU cores. The default bin chip offers a 60-core GPU, or for a small additional upgrade fee of $1,000, you can have 16 more for a total of 76 graphics cores. The M2 Ultra chip is basically 2 M2 Max chips joined together, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a huge amount of performance for serious workloads. But, and you know there has to be a but, you can specify these exact same chips in the Mac Studio. Now, it's true that you don't get those 6 PCIe slots and you get 2 fewer Thunderbolt ports with the Mac Studio, but it's also $3,000 less. $3,000. And that's the price you pay for that admittedly very nicely machined Mac Pro chassis with its PCI Express expansion. And that might be okay if you get to keep the chassis when you upgrade. Say, for example, if that M2 Ultra system on chip was a module that you could replace. But you can't. Or if those PCIe slots added support for more GPU power, which they don't. So I've been stewing over this since watching the WWDC keynote yesterday, trying to make sense of it, and I have come to some conclusions. The Mac Pro was traditionally Apple's most powerful Mac, particularly well suited to professional workflows. They were never cheap, but they were priced at a level that made them accessible to professionals who perhaps wanted the upgradability or the prestige of a Mac Pro, but didn't necessarily need its performance. And because of this, many of us creative professionals still think of the Mac Pro as being our Mac, the one that we really need to do our work. But the truth is, we don't. We've got MacBook Pros and the Mac Mini with the M2 Pro chip, not to mention now the Mac Studio with the same performance that you can get in the new Mac Pro. We tell ourselves that we need that upgradability and that expansion space, but the truth is, many of us don't. And Apple doesn't want us to buy a computer and use it for 10 years. They want us to buy a computer and use it for maybe 3 to 5 years, and then buy another computer from them. The Mac Pro isn't for us, which leads us to the inevitable question, who is it for? Well, it's professional users who specifically need PCI Express expansion cards, and the clue here is in the cards that Apple referred to in its keynote. First of all, storage. You can add a huge amount of very fast storage into a Mac Pro. So if you're a professional working with huge data sets, that might be critical to your workflow. Secondly, there's ultra-fast networking. Perhaps you're a professional user who needs more than the single 10 gigabit Ethernet port that the Mac Studio offers. Maybe you need multiple network connections or SFP ports or super-fast 25 gigabit fiber. That sort of connectivity might be critical to your workflow, and you can do it with Mac Pro. And thirdly, there's audio interfaces. Audio professionals often need multiple I/O cards for audio and MIDI connections. Or they might need a controller card for a digital signal processor or some other piece of highly specific equipment, and that might be critical to their workflow. Fourthly, video interfaces. Video professionals working in broadcast, live production, or studio environments might need to capture multiple video feeds simultaneously and have them encoded to ProRes in real time. That could be critical to their workflow. Critical to their workflow. That's the key to understanding the target audience for Mac Pro. These are professionals who, for whatever reason, are tied to macOS and who need this type of expandability. And they are willing to pay for it because they will see a return on that outlay. And it doesn't matter whether it's reasonable to charge $3,000 for a chassis or not. Professionals will be buying through corporations which usually get the product without paying sales tax, and they can write the cost down against their profits, making further tax savings. Just to give you an example, here in the UK the entry-level Mac Pro retails at £7,200, and that includes 20% sales tax which a business can claim back. Also, write the expense off against profits and corporation tax at the 25% rate, and the end result is that the machine costs £4,500. And that's a big difference which businesses will understand, but consumers who aren't dealing with these type of things typically don't. It is frustrating that professionals will need to spec the non-upgradable RAM and GPU when they order, trying to anticipate their future needs. But this may not be as big a deal as it seems. The CPU is very powerful. It's more than enough for the vast majority of tasks that this machine will be bought for. In 3 years' time, I'd say it will still be very powerful. I'm still blown away by my M1 Max laptop, and that's a year and a half after buying it. And I can't see that my workflow is going to change significantly in the next 18 months either, so 3 years seems reasonable. And you can probably add another 3 years to that, where this machine will still be a beast for certain workflows. Choosing the RAM for your new Mac Pro is actually pretty easy. You don't go for 64 gigabytes because that's not enough for all those graphics cores, and you'd probably regret choosing 64, so let's take it off the table. You're left with 128 or 192 gigabytes, and that is a huge amount of RAM. And if you need more than that, you won't be buying the Mac Pro anyway. Even in 6 years' time, 128 or 192 gigabytes of RAM will still be a lot. And sure, I know you can buy workstations that support vastly more memory than that, but we're not talking about that target demographic. Audio and video professionals can certainly do very well with 128 or 192 gigabytes. And storage isn't so much of an issue on the Mac Pro either, thanks to its PCIe expandability. Why spec more than 1 terabyte? Because you can add more without breaking the bank by paying the Apple SSD tax. So choosing your specification up front really comes down to choosing the right number of GPU cores, because as things stand, you won't be plugging additional GPUs into those PCIe slots. Now maybe Apple will release GPU cards in the future, but I suspect that's probably unlikely, so don't go and buy Mac Pro on the hope that that will happen. Let's come back to our original question. Does Apple care about the Mac Pro? Yes, but it tempers that caring with realism. This is a niche product for specific industry workflows, and those industries were previously happy paying vastly more for Intel Mac Pros, which don't offer the performance of Apple Silicon. So there will be plenty of professionals ordering these things, and no doubt a few brave YouTubers as well. Not me though. For the rest of us, there's the Mac Studio, and if you need 1 or 2 expansion cards, you can probably achieve that with a Thunderbolt PCIe enclosure. Basically, if you don't understand the Mac Pro or its pricing, then it's probably safe to say that Apple didn't make it with you in mind. Anyway, what do you think about this new Mac Pro? I'm really looking forward to reading your comments on this one. I'll see you again soon for some more geekery.